Hey everyone, welcome back to the Crafty Couple. Hope you're having a fantastic weekend. Today we're stepping away from Christmas, so hopefully you guys are excited for something a little different. We were going for kind of a modern, industrial, or rustic look, and honestly, I think that these projects could go with a lot of different decor styles. It just depends on how you want to finish them up. You could use different stains, different paints, and I think that they would fit with a lot of different styles. So we are really excited for the DIYs today. If you guys do enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up and let us know in the comments which one's your favorite.
For this first project, we're going to start out with a pack of these rectangle wood pieces from Dollar Tree, and they come with 6 in a pack. For each shelf, you will only need 2, so go ahead and set 2 aside for each of the shelf, and of course there'll be 3 shelves. To make the shelf, what we're going to do is just glue the ends together, and then once the ends are glued together, we're going to flip it around, and just to make it more stable, we're going to hot glue a little piece of, it's a craft stick from Dollar Tree, and right at the seam we're just going to hot glue it just to give it more stability and make sure it doesn't just come apart. I decided to put it all together first before staining it because I had a few comments last video and several videos before that people were having a hard time gluing things together after things were stained. So definitely try doing this first before staining it and see if that helps. I noticed that this did work for me just fine, but we haven't always had the issue with staining things not working. So then go ahead and do this with the 2 other shelves. When those are done, we're going to go in with the early American stain. We're going to set those aside and let them dry for a little bit, and we are going to work on the dowels. So I grabbed this, I think there's 6-inch wood dowels from Dollar Tree, and we will only need 8 of them for this project. And then I painted all of them with the Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. And then I'm also going to be painting in the same ink color these long skewers, also from Dollar Tree. When you paint them, don't paint the very ends. You'll want to make sure that you just have a really good bond on all the edges. And so what I did was just on all of the corners, I am putting one of the dowels. Once again, we are just using hot glue for time purposes, but definitely use E6000 or wood glue in combination with this so that it is a stronger hold in the ends. Once you have those on all 4 corners, it's time to add the next shelf. So the easiest way that I found was to flip everything over and then to add hot glue at the bottom of the shelf and then add the top of the dowels to it and then do the same on the other side. When you use hot glue, it does bend pretty easy still, so you don't have an issue with it being too stiff. So they do bend pretty easy, so you can kind of manipulate where they go. Now we have 2 shelves and we're going to add another layer of the dowels. So just like we did before, go all the way on each corner and add another set of the dowels. Try and line them up as perfectly as you can with the bottom layer so it does look like there's just one straight dowel going from the bottom all the way to the top. And then finally we are going to add our very top shelf. And then I just did the same thing once again. I flipped it all over. And then we are going to add little dots where we're going to put the very top of the dowels and then just place them on top. Now that this shelf is complete, we are going to add the X in the back, and to do that we are going to grab the long skewers. I didn't do any exact measurements, I just measured from one end to the other, and then I cut it just with the wire cutters. And then you can make any adjustments. If it's a little bit too long, you can cut off a little bit if you need to. And then I went in with the hot glue gun and I put a little dot at the top, the middle, and then the bottom, and then just held it there until it was dry. The second X, I did the exact same thing. I just measured it and then cut it with the wire cutters. And on the second one, it will bow slightly because it's going over the first skewer. And the only thing you have to make sure is that the top side is glued down really well so that it can bend over the middle. It worked just fine for me since the skewers bend very, very easy in the first place.
So for this project, we're going to create a really clean and modern kind of industrial tray, and we're going to use this gold wire basket and go ahead and start by painting that matte black. Now, this project we had already completed, but I guess we accidentally deleted the footage or we misplaced it. We couldn't find it. So rather than using all the supplies again to recreate this, I took it apart and I'm just going to show you how to do this. So what we're doing here is we're going to take these stir sticks from Walmart. These are the 5-gallon ones. They come in a pack of 3. And the first thing that you want to do is measure it from corner to corner on the bottom here, right there at that point all the way over to this point, and that's where we're going to cut it. So I would mark it, cut your first one, and then use that as a template for the other ones. You're going to need 5 total. As you can see, there's already hot glue on here and the basket has kind of been messed up a little bit from pulling that off. But like I said, I didn't want to reuse all the supplies if we already had made this, but I wanted to show you guys how this worked and how easy it is, but it looks really, really good when you're done. The easiest way I found to glue these on here is to flip the basket upside down and then hold the wood up against it. So you want to start right there on that very end line that goes across there at the bottom. And then I'm just putting quite a bit of hot glue under the wire here. And then we're going to actually hold up and press the wood against that until it's glued in place. For the next one, just do the same thing, line it up with our previous piece, and then put those big dabs of glue underneath there. And then if you need to, flip it over and kind of look at it, because what you don't want is you don't want one to be higher, one to be lower, because if you start putting stuff on it, it's just going to be a little wonky and you might hit the lip of the wood. So flip it over, look at it, make sure that when you're gluing these down that they're flush with each other, so you don't have to worry about any of that when you're done. And then when you get towards the other side, just turn it around, and then that way you can kind of hold the wood up from the other side, and then you're gonna glue that piece down. It should fit in there really nice from one end to the other with the 5 stir sticks. And then that's really it for this. It's a super simple project, but it looks really, really good when you're done. And the other thing that you could add is some handles, maybe some rope handles or some leather. I think that that would look really clean and modern on it as well.
For this project, I just grabbed 2 of these gold baskets from Dollar Tree. I've noticed that they've kind of released a ton of these gold baskets. I was looking for them a lot a few months ago, and then of course they dump all of them out now. And then we are going to grab one of these rectangle wood pieces from Dollar Tree and then a square one. I'm going to spray paint all of the metal baskets with this oil rub bronze spray paint, and then stain the 2 wood pieces with the early American stain. And then once those baskets are done and those are stained, we're going to cut the baskets, since we are going to put the wood down like this on the front, and that'll be kind of our shelf part. So on the very bottom one, you do not want to cut all the way to the back. You want to leave that very bottom one so that the wood has a place to sit, and I'll show you right here. So you see that there's that very, very bottom layer that it can rest on. And then we're only going to leave the very, very back grid so that it just kind of has a cute decorative purpose. The easiest way is just to cut all of the wire first and then try and cut it very close after you get the bulk of the wire off. So now that we have the bulk of the wire off, I bent the bottom portion a little bit so that it was more flat. And then we are going to go in and just cut those pieces as close as we can, just so that the very back is nice and clean. When I did the second shelf, I did notice that you can kind of bend these pieces back and forth, and it almost makes a very, very clean cut, or like it just kind of breaks off, and that works a lot better than trying to cut it. This is what it should look like after everything is cut. I realize now that you probably should have just cut everything first and then spray painted it. So now we are going to put the wood piece on. And to attach any wood to metal like this, what we found is that it's a lot easier to flip it over and just hot glue the wood like this and just kind of put it on top. Just load it up, you won't see it anyways. And once again, you can use E6000 in combination with the hot glue, or you can use wood glue, kind of whatever works for you. We just use this hot glue for time purposes. And then I spray painted 2 normal size skewers with the oil rub bronze spray paint. Now we are going to work on that second shelf. For this second one, you will not need to cut the bottom like we did before. You will just want to cut around it. So as you see here, you would just want to cut around it and then just leave the whole backing like we did before. Just like I said at the first one, just cut the bulk of the metal off and then go in and make it look nice. This is where I realized you can kind of just bend them back and forth, which ends up being a lot easier than cutting them. So when that looks all nice and clean, we are going to do the same thing like we did before. Just make sure that the wood piece is centered and just hot glue all of the contact points from the metal to the wood and make sure that's secured. This part doesn't really give it any stability. I just thought it looked really nice. So with the skewer, we are going to just put it on the side. I didn't do any measurements once again, but I just put it on the side from the corner of the top to the corner of the bottom of the wood, and then cut it with the wire cutters. And then I'm just adding a tiny bit of hot glue and then putting it from one end to the other. Then I flipped it around and used another skewer, and then I did the exact same thing, measured from one end to the other, and then cut it with the wire cutters and then hot glued it. This is how it looked after. I thought it looked very industrial, kind of rustic and modern, and I think it looks very, very nice. And now we're going to move on to the second one and do the same thing with the skewers. So what we're going to do is turn it on its side and then just do the same thing with the skewer and measure from one end to the other and cut it. Add a tiny bit of hot glue and put it on there. It doesn't need a ton of hot glue just because it is kind of for a decorative purpose only. Just to make sure it was secured, I did add just a tiny bit of hot glue on the back. And then to just kind of cover up the parts that weren't painted or where we cut the dowels, I went in just with a tiny bit of black paint and covered those portions. And then the top pieces where we hot glued it on, I painted those black so they look like they were welded together.
For this project, we're going to be making a little table lamp, and we're going to use one of these Dollar Tree craft boxes. You only need the lid, so go ahead and save the bottom part for another craft. And then what we're going to be using is these craft sticks from Dollar Tree. I would just grab a couple packs depending on how big or how many of these lamps you want to make. A couple packs should work good for you. And then what I did was just cut off one end so that it was straight, and then I held it up to the craft box and then cut the other end off so that it's the same length of the actual lid itself. And then we can use this one as a template for all the other sticks that we're going to cut. Now, I cut all of these the same length. When we actually start putting these together, we will trim them a little bit. And then I'm going to use 4 of these 12-inch dowels from Dollar Tree and go ahead and spray paint those with the matte black. Or if you have just a black chalk paint or acrylic paint, that will work just fine as well. Once we have our dowels painted, we can go ahead and glue these into each corner. I'm just using some hot glue. It should work just fine for this project. We're not really going to have much weight or anything going on with these, so if you guys want to use the hot glue for this, it should be fine. As always though, you're more than welcome to use something stronger for a longer lasting hold. And then when gluing these in, I just put a little bit of glue at the bottom and then run it up the side, and then I'm going to go ahead and stick the dowel as close and tight into that corner as possible so that these are all as uniform as we can get them. Once we have all of the dowels glued in there, we can move on to gluing our craft sticks in here. And you want to just leave a little bit of a gap in between each one. I didn't do any actual measurements. I just looked at it and went with one that I felt like was appropriate for the size of this project. And then I'm gluing this front piece here. What I would recommend doing is picking a side that you're going to have as the front, so you can try and keep it as clean as possible and as, I guess, uniform, and then keep that as the front so that if you kind of get off in the back, it really isn't going to matter since that's going to be the back part. Because what I did here is I started in the front and then I moved all the way around. I would try and do it a little bit different than that, and I'll show you here in just a little bit what I mean. I ended up doing the front and then the 2 sides so that I could try and control that and keep it as clean as possible, and then that way when you get around to the back, like right here, If stuff doesn't quite match up as well as you wanted to, or there's some pieces sticking out more, it's not gonna matter because it's in the back. So try and stick with one side being the front and then to the side. So like right here, you can see I've gone up on the front and then I'm gonna add the two sides. So you can see I've done the front and then the two sides, and now the back is a lot easier. I can just kind of put these on here. They don't have to look as good. So that's what I would try and do. Hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Start with the front and then add the two sides, and then that way when you get to the back, it's not as crucial if things aren't lining up as perfect. Once you have all of the craft sticks glued around the whole thing and all the way to the top, you can either leave it as is, or if you need to trim a little bit, you can do that. Mine had a little bit of the dowel sticking up, so I just took some wire cutters and went ahead and cut the extra off of there so that it's flush with the top of this. This next part is completely optional. It just depends on how you want to finish this project. I'm using the Early American stain from Minwax to give it a darker look. I wanted it to be modern, but also kind of a rustic industrial feel. So if you wanted to leave it as is, or not even paint the skewers or the dowels, I mean, in the beginning, you could just leave those as is, and I think it would look really well with like beach decor, boho decor with that natural wood. And then to finish this up, all we need to do is add our puck light so that we can complete that lamp. Thanks for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to check out more of our Dollar Tree DIYs, make sure to jump through right here and you can watch our playlist with a ton of other videos on it. And as always, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you can be notified every time we upload a new video.